Welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogram Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. I follow my guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Hello and welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast. I am Dr. Supatra Tovar, and I'm so excited to have health coach, author, and weight loss for food lovers podcaster, Molly Zemek, with us here today. Molly, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Tovar.
I'm excited. We are pod swapping. I was on Molly's podcast and was just so impressed with her skills and what she has to offer that I invited her onto mine. And so I am so excited to be able to pick her brain. Before I do that, I am going to read you just a little bit about Molly, and then I'm going to get right into my questions for her. Molly Zemek is a certified life coach and weight loss expert who helps people end emotional eating and transform their relationship with food. Drawing on her own journey of losing 40 pounds and her deep understanding of the psychological ties to eating habits, Molly developed a proven framework to guide individuals towards sustainable weight loss without restrictive dieting. And if you guys know anything about me, I'm all about that. As the host of the Weight Loss for Food Lovers podcast, Molly shares insights into achieving balance, enjoyment, and freedom with food. Her practical, compassionate approach empowers people to live happier, healthier lives while still savoring the foods they love. So as you can see, you guys, Molly and I are on the same page. It is about bringing back the enjoyment of food and stopping restrictive dieting. Welcome, Molly.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction.
Thank you. Well, I would love to dig in to your personal story. You did find a way to lose 40 pounds, but just tell us what led to the weight gain and how did you lose 40 pounds and then learn how to help people overcome emotional eating?
Well, it began with just being part of a family of food lovers. That's the easiest way to describe it. So I grew up with an Italian father, and everything centered around good food. And all of our conversations focused on eating well. And I joke that after breakfast, the first thing we talked about was what would be for lunch. And so I just grew up in an environment where we prioritized high quality ingredients. We prioritized eating well. I understood from an early age the importance of food and how good it could taste when you cooked with the right type of ingredients. And so it just became a passion of mine from an early age. And I really started to equate eating with love. I mean, it certainly was a love language in my house when I was growing up as a child. So much so that I abandoned my graduate degree in Spanish to go to culinary school because I just felt so passionate about cooking. I was spending all of my time experimenting with recipes, reading cookbooks instead of textbooks, watching cooking shows, going to the farmer's market. And it really was just my secret dream to become a chef. And so I spent 10 years working as a chef after I graduated from culinary school and just was really pursuing what I call a love affair with food, just really in pursuit of the most delicious bite that I could create.
Yes.
And I love to eat. I love to eat well. I was in an environment where I had the opportunity to cook with the best ingredients possible. I enjoyed every minute of it and then continued on working as a private chef. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s and late 40s as a new mom that my habits of overeating and also over drinking, because I'm also a certified sommelier. And as I mean, there is a real relationship between good wine and good food. And that was one of my big life pleasures for a long, long time. And so I recognized in my 30s and 40s that my habit of overeating and overdrinking was really catching up with me. Dr. Tovar, I mean, our bodies just don't respond the same way to eating
Yep.
the same amount of food as we get older.
Yep. That's what I went through.
Yes. And so it was actually a blessing in disguise because I started to become a lot more in touch with my body. First, just by listening to a lot of the biofeedback that I was receiving, just increased anxiety, indigestion, low mood, low energy. And as a new mom, it was just really taking its toll on me. But I also just knew that I couldn't revert back to my tried and true approach of dieting because that wasn't really working the same way either. I just couldn't easily lose the weight. And it was frustrating because I would inevitably regain the weight because I wanted to go back to eating all the delicious food I loved. So that is just a little bit of my journey in a nutshell. But I remember being in my 40s, really just feeling dissatisfied with my life. I had everything I wanted. I had a wonderful family, an amazing job. Everything that I thought I wanted, but I just felt miserable. And the only thing that I looked forward to was just a couple glasses of wine at night, delicious food, and that was no longer satisfying me. And so I just knew that something needed to change. I just didn't know how to change it. And I just began really seeking solutions. I really was just open to trying something different. And it was around that time that I discovered life coaching. And I started asking some deeper questions. What were some of the reasons why I was so motivated to eat the way I did? Why did I have so much desire for food and for wine? By the way, I never considered myself an alcoholic. I was drinking maybe 2 to 3 glasses of wine a night. So I felt like I could control my drinking to a certain extent, but I just had a lot of desire for it. It really was a regular habit that I didn't like, and it was affecting my health. So when I discovered life coaching and I started really unearthing the reasons behind the eating and the drinking, I started to become a lot more in touch with my emotional life, something that I was just not familiar with at all because when my family of food lovers, we didn't talk about feelings. I mean, I was I grew up hearing that I was just too sensitive. I never really had the language or the process of working through my feelings, which I'm sure probably many of your listeners can relate to. I think that it's a common experience. So all of a sudden I was presented with this opportunity when I wasn't eating more than I needed to or drinking wine every night to really come face to face with my feelings. And through that process and through the process of really understanding some of the thinking behind the habit of overeating and overdrinking, I completely changed my life. I lost the 40 pounds, which was amazing. But actually, I mean, what I accomplished was so much more than that because I really developed a much better relationship with myself. I started to understand my deeper needs through my emotional life. I just felt I developed so much more confidence. I was showing up much better as a mom. I was communicating my feelings more. I started to better understand what mattered to me because I was paying attention to my feelings. And this wasn't an overnight process, and it's still not a process that's complete. It's an ongoing process of understanding yourself. But I was so inspired by this journey and just how different it was from previous diets that I had been on that I just thought I have to share this with other food lovers, with other people who are like me, who think they just love good food too much to be able to control themselves. And I need them to know that food is not the problem.
What would you say was the emotional driver for you? What was causing you to turn to food? If you could link it to life events or emotional states or mental health, what would you say it was?
Yeah, and there are a number of things that it was linked to. One of the things that I discovered is that when I was fatigued, when I often in situations, if I was taking on more than really I could handle, which I mean, other moms listening to this podcast, I'm sure can relate to this. It's not just moms, but anytime we sort of take on more out of obligation to be available to other people, we have to take it from somewhere. And so from that place of really feeling depleted and exhausted, I, experienced all kinds of cravings just to eat for relief, eat for comfort, eat for me time.
Yeah.
But also, I've had experiences of wanting to eat out of boredom. It doesn't always feel comfortable to not do things and to give yourself
Mhm.
downtime when you're an overachiever or when you feel like you always need to be busy or you always need to be accomplishing things. So experiencing boredom can sometimes trigger cravings to eat.
Yes.
So that's another example. There was also a connection while I was doing this work between feeling disappointed in myself, feeling like I let
Mm.
myself down or feeling like I let other people down, and
Mm.
a desire to eat as a way to escape that feeling.
Wow.
Now, this is my
Well,
unique experience and it's not the same for everybody, but those were
mhm.
feelings that I needed to identify and figure out new ways of coping with.
How were you letting people down? In what ways did you feel like you weren't living up to what you needed to do?
I think I've always been somebody with big goals. I've always been a sort of a high achiever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if that where that comes from, if that's something that I learned growing up. I think it's certainly a positive trait, but it can have a downside because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes my expectations for myself are unrealistic or they're so high that there's not really the appropriate balance where I feel like I'm maybe getting the downtime that I need. And so I think sometimes the disappointment might come and it could be having a high standard for myself as a mom and thinking I'm
Mm-hmm.
not good enough. This is something I think a lot of people can relate to. It's I'm not good enough as a mom. I'm not doing a good enough job. I'm not being the perfect
Yes.
mom, right?
Yes.
And
I
so
actually
that
think
kind
that
of
that's like the
disappointment.
main driver of most people's issues, innate or just ingrained sense of not feeling good enough. What did you do? How did you address that? And how were you able to reduce the stress, emotional, or mindless eating that you were encountering?
Yeah, there are a lot of different layers to it. I would say that it really started with my decision to really try and listen to my body and to respond to hunger cues and to try to eat when I felt physically hungry and to use
Mm-hmm.
that as a signal that it was the appropriate time to eat. And that if I had a craving or an urge to eat and I wasn't physically hungry, then that was something to investigate. So that was sort
Mm-hmm.
of the premise of it. And as I started down that path, if I had a craving, and of course, this was not a perfect process, and none of us are perfect eaters, nor do we need to be perfect eaters. This is a very imperfect, real life way of eating. And so there were times when I would give into the craving and I would eat. And in those situations, I spent time really reflecting on what happened and trying to
Mm-hmm.
understand how I was feeling leading up to that. And
Mm-hmm.
even if I didn't know how I was feeling, which was often the case in the early days as I was trying to even just understand my feelings, I would just guess. Okay, I don't know. I think I was just like disappointed in myself. I was disappointed that this is how I handled the situation, or I was disappointed because of this. And then I would try and piece it together. I would try and think, okay, why was I feeling disappointed? And
Mm-hmm.
through my background as a life coach, I understand kind of the relationship between my thinking and the feelings that are generated by my thoughts. So I was thinking,
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, what was I thinking about that situation that made me feel disappointed? And I would work on processing my feeling after the fact. And then to take it even deeper, I would start to just really question the situation. Do I want to feel disappointed about this? Sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
did. Sometimes I didn't want to change how I felt. I was like, yeah, I do want to feel disappointed. Other
Mm-hmm.
times I realized that I had different ways I could think about the same situation. Okay, maybe it's not that I'm not a good mom. Maybe actually I am a good mom and I'm not perfect and I was doing my best. Maybe that's how I want to think about it. But
Mm-hmm.
I did the best I could. And I was able to
Yeah.
reframe my thinking and realize, okay, yeah, I actually did the best I could. So I'm feeling a little bit different about it.
Very similar approaches. And I think the main connection between the two of us, it's really about a journey into self awareness, really understanding the difference between emotional hunger, physical hunger, that self awareness of, am I physically hungry
Right.
or is there something emotionally going on that I need to just bring my awareness to? Another area where we are similar is that you encourage people to enjoy food without overeating. And my whole wish and desire for people is that they really can bring the joy back into eating. So, how do you strike the balance between enjoying food and not overeating? And what do you suggest for your clients?
Well, it begins with really listening to your body and really tapping into that true physical hunger, like you mentioned, because there's nothing more satisfying than eating from a place of hunger. It just makes the meal that much more pleasurable. And when you get good at listening to your body, not only are you able to eat more in alignment with your body, but you're also able to identify what foods make me feel good, which foods don't. And I really do think that we can develop more desire for foods that make us feel good through that awareness of just acknowledging, you know what, I feel really good when I eat this, and it happens to taste good. There are some many foods that we can enjoy and indulge in that maybe aren't the best foods for our body. And I think that those deserve a spot at the table as well. And what I encourage people to do is to really identify the sweet spot, is what I call it. And what is the ideal amount of this food that you can eat where you really maximize the pleasure in the taste of it without sacrificing the pleasure in your body. This does take a lot of mindfulness. So my recommendation to people is that as you are going through this process of maybe changing your relationship with food and being more intentional and more mindful, that at first you decide in advance when you're going to have some of these foods, so that you're not responding to urges, so that you're not giving into a craving, so that you aren't experiencing that emotional charge that can often lead people to be less conscious when they're eating, and can often lead people to dismiss the signals of their body and continue eating beyond their ideal satiety point. So really thinking through, okay, what foods do I absolutely love? Which foods are really worth it? Sometimes our brains can give us like all kinds of suggestions as far as what foods we feel like we want, what we're craving. But not all of those foods, if you start to pay attention, are really that enjoyable. They don't have a ton of flavor. They're not really satisfying when we eat them. And so I think the best foods to do this with are foods that are highly flavorful, that are things that you just absolutely love, that you can say, when I have a bite of this, just is like my absolute favorite. And when I have a couple of bites, I'm really getting the full experience of eating it. Maybe it's something like, I mean, it's different for different people, but for me, it could be a flourless chocolate cake or a really good homemade vanilla ice cream made with vanilla beans and heavy cream, and something where I can have a couple of bites, experience the full flavor, and not need to eat beyond a couple of bites to really experience how amazing it is and still feel good in my body.
Yes. I think it's so important that we have a food neutral mindset. We tend to moralize food as good or bad. And when we actually say that there's all foods that are open to us, it gives us permission to actually truly taste them, as opposed to just stuffing it down our faces as fast as we can because we're really not supposed to eat this bad food and we can't actually enjoy it. Making it neutral, where it's not moralized, I think has been really revolutionary for my clients. And it sounds like that's what you're doing as well. And we tend to go for these foods that are on the less healthful scale when we're usually feeling emotional. So you help people a lot with the emotional eating struggle. Why do you think food becomes the coping mechanism for emotions? And how do people start changing that pattern?
Well, it becomes the coping mechanism because many of us grow up learning that food is an easy source of comfort, right? We're rewarded with food, or it's just easily available. We live in a culture where it's normalized to eat very large portions and to eat a lot of processed food, right? A lot of processed food creates more cravings for food. And so I think that it's a very accessible, very normalized, very easy way to experience some relief if you are in emotional distress. And when many of us don't really have the tools to make sense of our feelings or understand our feelings or even to know what to do with our feelings, it's easy to just have a bowl of ice cream, have a glass of wine, grab a piece of cake, and just be completely mindless. And when we do that, it really does provide some momentary relief. If you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling angry, right? All of that energy from your nervous system gets redirected towards your digestion, and you feel kind of relief and you feel some momentary pleasure. So I think that it's a very easy and convenient thing for people to fall into. And I think that there's also just a lack of awareness around how to change your relationship with food without dieting. And so many people just think, okay, well, the solution is that you just have to eat quote unquote clean foods or good foods. I have to get rid of all of the bad foods. Except that only increases your temptation to want to overeat those foods. So it just becomes this vicious cycle.
Yes. That leads me into the next question. And I work a lot in this area. There are so many misconceptions about weight loss. What are the biggest misconceptions that you find, especially for people who love food?
Well, I mean, the big one that I talk about all of the time is that you have to give up the food you love to be at your ideal weight. That there are right and wrong foods.
Yeah.
That there are set rules. I mean, just if we want to create an umbrella misconception, is that there are set rules that you have to follow. What I discovered when I finally was able to lose the weight and feel at peace with food without depriving myself and without giving up the things that I love is that the key was really learning how to listen to my body, learning how to listen to the physical cues, learning how to listen to the emotional cues, understanding my thinking and thoughts like, I shouldn't be eating this, thoughts like, oh, I deserve this. A lot of those unconscious thoughts that actually fuel overeating that many of us aren't aware of, a lot of that plays into the overeating. And so for me, learning, like shifting the focus back to my body and learning how to listen to my physical body, learning how to listen to my mind, learning how to pay attention to my emotions, really gave me everything that I needed to know to get to my ideal weight. Now, it wasn't just, like I said, an overnight switch. I mean, it's a process of peeling back the layers. As awareness is something that can build over time. But I think once you learn how to listen to your body and you start to understand yourself better, it really is, in my opinion, a permanent solution.
I agree.
You lose that desire to overeat the way that you used to.
And I think you lose the desire to go into dieting because I love to tell people is that you're not a math equation. Your needs change day to day depending on your activity. And if you ascribe yourself a 1,200 calorie diet, which is not enough to fuel a toddler, you're not going to have the energy that you need to get through your day. And you're not going to be able to sustain that long term. So it's so important not to think in calories because you just don't know how much you're going to need in a day. The only way that you're going to know is by listening to your body and honoring your hunger, because your hunger, a lot of people think, is a bad thing. It is not a bad thing. It's your body telling you need nutrients. And when you truly listen to that and you honor that and you give your body what it needs at that time, it may be something richer, it may be something lighter. It just depends on what your body needs. When you listen to that, you're telling your body that you're actually safe.
Yes.
And when your body feels safe, that's when it's able to burn off fat. And dieting does not lead to that. You're losing muscle and you're not losing fat because your body's in that stressed state.
Yeah.
Well, I want to be mindful of the time because we're out of time for this half of this podcast episode, but we're going to be coming back very shortly for the second half because I have a ton more questions for you, Molly. But thank you so much for joining me for this half. And thank you all for joining us. Please tune in next time for the second half of this wonderful interview with coach, author, and weight loss for food lovers podcaster, Molly Zemek. Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Insight Podcast. Please remember, the contents shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Insight Podcast tab. And follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.